Good afternoon. Okay. I want to thank you all for coming, and happy day to the appropriate people that are here that are observing that great American Day, Father's Day. And welcome to those of us who are with us through the magic of Zoom. This afternoon's conversation comes as a result of our seeking a fitting way to conclude our many groups that have read and discussed Ari Shavit's book, My Promised Land, The Triumph and Tragedy of Zionism. Larry Cooley suggested that we invite his colleague and friend Hisham Jabi to join us for this conversation. And I am smart enough to know that any suggestion offered by Larry, the only good answer is yes. I also remember a fascinating morning that I had with a group of rabbinic colleagues several years ago when Larry invited Hisham to come to speak to us about the challenges in Israel and the Palestinian people. That was an eye-opening exercise for all of us. Larry, we hopefully all know well enough as a longtime MICA member, past MICA president, and a leading expert and thought leader in the field of international organizational aid development. Read his bio online. Please really read it. It's wowing. Hisham, a Palestinian American from Nablus, also works in international development. He is the founder and CEO of Jabi Consulting, a firm that specializes in digital transformation, entrepreneurship, and organizational capacity building in the Middle East and North Africa. His passion, in his own words, is to create positive change by empowering Middle East and North African youth to become self-sufficient and thrive in the 21st century. We are deeply honored to have Mr. Jabi with us this afternoon. At this point, I turn things over to Larry, who will guide our conversations, and questions will be in our traditional way via the note cards that you will pass in. And the note cards are here with pencils, and we'll pass them around now. Betsy's here, so if you think you may want to offer a question, please raise your hand, or we'll pass the note cards around. We'll collect them at the end. And this is how we'll do the Q&A. And for the people on Zoom, we'll handle the Q&A through Zoom. Somebody, presumably somewhere, is watching that. Larry, it's all yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and thanks everybody for being here. Thanks, Lauren, for trusting this idea. So this is a little bit of an experiment. I hope nobody thinks they're here under false pretenses when I say what I'm about to say. But we're not really going to talk about the book. We're going to talk more about talking about the book. And one of the things that was so clear to me in trying to facilitate a couple of the groups that Lauren put together to talk about the book is that the way people react to this seems to be so influenced by their lived experience. And so many of us who were talking about it had relatively similar lived experiences. So it seemed to me, and I hope you'll agree at the end of the hour, that there's value to trying to stretch that a little bit and listen to the book as it appears to somebody with a somewhat different lived experience. Now, we could have picked a really wider range on this. We could have picked, for example, a settler and a militant. We could have picked let's say people on both sides of the college campus divide right now. We're not that ambitious, and you'll see this is still pretty ambitious. Namely, it's an exercise in what you might call radical empathy, which is just try to stand back and try to see the same reality, but from the point of view it might appear if you were starting from a different personal history. Now, in this case, we have a progressive rabbi and a progressive Palestinian American. That may not sound wide, but it's not small. And so we're going to try to look at the book from that point of view and try and just see what that illuminates in terms of the book. So this is not, I've been very clear with Danny and with Hisham. They are not here as analysts, although they know a lot about the situation. We're not going to debate the facts, although they're facts that are debatable. In this, we're going to try to react to a book from two different perspectives and see what that brings to light. Okay, I'm going to, even though we've done a little bit of this prior to the event, I'm going to, for everyone else's benefit, I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourselves to each other in a way that might be illuminating in terms of your perspective on a book like this. This is the one time I'm going to give Hisham a little more airtime because you all know Danny, but most of you don't know Hisham. So even though they're ostensibly introducing themselves to each other, I give Danny the shorter introduction and Hisham the longer one. Danny?
Hello, Hisham. I grew up in Chicago in what can best be described I think an observant Jewish family, and our home life was centered on Zionism in a very, very, very strong way. My mother's father had been the president of the Zionist Organization of America. He sent my mother to boarding school in Palestine because he wanted her to learn Hebrew. So she was in Palestine in the early 30s, pre-state Israel, studying in Hebrew there with her sister, living in a dormitory in Haifa. So I heard stories growing up about the dream of the pre-state settlers. I grew up in a Hebrew day school that had very, very strong kind of Zionist orientation, learning the songs of the Yishuv, pre-state settlement. And my first trip to Israel was in 1966, the summer after I became bar mitzvah, and it was a wonderful dream. I proceeded to go back during college, rabbinical school, and many, many, many times. And I can't imagine, and I don't want to imagine a Jewish life without a state of Israel.
Hisham? Is this work?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everybody, for inviting me. Thank you.
Can everybody hear okay? You might have to raise that a little bit.
How about now? Much better? Okay, thank you so much. Thank you very much for Rabbi Zemel for inviting me today, and Ari and everybody. My name is Hisham Jabi. I was born and raised in Nablus, in the northern part of the West Bank. I am a very proud father for Hannah, who's sitting here, and she helped me to relive my childhood. And if any word that can describe that childhood, growing up in Palestine, is fears, constant fears of the unknown. But I knew at early stage that education is my only window to pull myself out of being one out of 10 people, 10 children, and my father was very, very busy bringing people to work as a child, as a cheap labor, I would say, but I knew early that I just want to really move in a different direction. So I was the first to go to college, and I paid for my education. I had to sell at age 12 fruit and vegetable and sweet to pay for the bus that took me to the school. So for me, education is about nirvana. It's about enlightenment. And that actually framed the way I look at everything around me, particularly they. In West Bank, when people say the word they, that means them, that means Jewish. They don't even distinguish between Israelis and Jewish. When it's the psychology of everything we do is around they. So I moved up and finished my undergrad in Birzeit University. But the biggest question I had that brought me today to talk to you is, who are these people? Why they are different? Why they come here? I was born in Nablus, and they built something called Alon Morey across the city. I mean, why would they come and settle there? So that curiosity took me to Martin Buber Center in Hebrew University to learn Hebrew. So if I don't learn Hebrew, how can I understand who they are? So that curiosity really got me a scholarship by President Clinton to spend 5 years in California, where I experienced, first time in my life, what does it mean to live as a free person in California. I never understand what does freedom mean. All what I understood is that they're coming, they're gonna arrest you, they're gonna take you. So I had a lot of intellectual curiosity to understand who these people are. And I finished my graduate degree, and I started a journey with a purpose to help those who did not have the advantage I have, which is the education and the scholarship, to especially women in the Middle East, to have a better life through concrete opportunities. So since then, I was working with MSI and the World Bank and other organizations. Currently, my private firm, it's a for-profit, but it has a very deep-rooted social impact, purpose to help people who have a dream like mine achieve their dream. So again, thank you very much for allowing me to introduce myself.
Thanks. Danny, I want you to, a little hard, okay, it's a little bit louder the next time. I want to ask you to do something that I think is probably not easy, but I warned you I was going to do it, which is I want you to react to the book not as it came across to you when you read it, but as you think you would if you were Hisham. And maybe you could start that out with, if I were you. And I'm going to ask Hisham to do the same thing. So this is, again, the book is the same book, but you're two somewhat different people. So if you had read that book as him, to the extent you can empathize and put yourself into that position, what do you think would have stood out for you?
Since we first discussed this a couple weeks ago, I've thought about that a lot. And I'm going to try and answer the way you suggest, the way you ask. And I'm going to introduce that by saying, when I first read the book, shortly after it came out, reading it as me, and I'm already kind of going, there were times I simply had to put the book down because it was so painful. Reading it as someone, reading it as Hisham, which I clearly can't do, but trying to project my imagination, I hope that I would be a generous enough spirited person to appreciate Ari Shavit for I think his generosity of spirit, his honesty in terms of critiquing his own past, his own people, the effort that formed him, and I think I would also be terribly wounded, be terribly aghast at the kind of arrogance behind the ambition of the project and the presuppositions of what it's about. The courage to write, and the courage that is for Shavit to write about the invisibility of my people when his ancestors first arrive is a kind of outrageous courage in itself. But in a sense, it makes it even more outrageous, the fanaticism of the original project kind of comes through from the very, very beginning. I hope that I would be, if I were you, have the courage, the wisdom, the patience, the wherewithal to poke around for the desperation that must be behind this project, motivating this project, a fear of where these people are coming from, these Jews from Europe. But I would be aghast at their both ignoring me and their ignorance about who is here in the land that they're coming to.
Thanks. And Hisham, I'll ask the same question of you. If you can imagine yourself reading this book as someone with a background like Danny's on this, how do you think it would come across to you?
Thank you. I just want to make sure that can you hear me now better? Oh, thank you. Sorry about that. If I put myself in your shoes, I would have a lot of conflicting emotions because you struck me as a person who appreciates humanity at large, and that is a very rare quality in 21st century to be able to see, to have a strong passion to the transformation and the pain that Jewish people went through. It is the worst genocide happened in the history of the humankind by large. The Holocaust is just shocking to me. When I read it, when I understood it, it's shocking by all means. What's shocking more is that I live in an Arab world where 95% of the people do not believe the Holocaust happened. That's actually double layer of shocking. So for you to be able to read, when you read this book as Rabbi Zemel, you probably have a basket of conflicting emotions because you are so into understanding and respecting and so much passionate about the transformation of the people and the stories. People really just went through learning a different language to be able to survive, or people changed their name to be able to keep themselves like safe. But at the same time, just hearing the author talking about the orange groves, about the towns that were wiped off the earth, to be able to, for Zionist movement to become reality, it's so conflicting and difficult in my judgment for you to read that book from that lenses.
Hisham, keep going. I want to ask you a question about the chapter that was most difficult for you now as yourself, not as Danny. You told me this, what I think you're about to say in such a poignant way. I hope you'll repeat it again now.
Yeah, actually, I read the book a few months ago. Then I was in Tel Aviv last week. I spent 3 weeks in Ramallah for a business trip. I am contractor for State Department, USAID. So I took a few days and stayed in Tel Aviv. And I had the book as an audio. So I was sitting in Tel Aviv with everybody on the beach and listening to the book. And there was like a chapter, I think 1975. And
The chapter on the settlements.
the stories of these people that went through extremely difficult time and hard and harsh transformation, to see the light. It's so emotional and so, I admired and felt so compassionate about the way they describe the promised land. It's so touchy to me. And I took the hat of being Palestinian. They talk about how committed to the project of Zionism, how much time and effort it took them to arrive to the refuge. And they talk about the beauty of the Holy Land. And they talk about the West Bank. And they talk about my city. The caveat that shocked me is that they were describing where I was born, where was my father born and buried, and where I was buried. So that I could not really understand. I mean, I could not even understand my emotion. I wanted so much to relate to that transformation and passion toward the land, except it is my country. I went to buy Hannah jewelry because she likes that. And I found like the map of Palestine, which we call it map of Palestine. It's the same. It's sold in Tel Aviv as the map of Israel. I could not, emotionally, could not buy it. It's the same. They sell it in Ramallah. It has two versions. It was really shocking when I read this chapter. To see, it's like you have two teenagers are in love with a beautiful lady called Palestine. They love her so much. They are so passionate about her. And she loves them both. And I did not really know how to make sense of this. So that's what I shared with you.
And what was next to you on the beach when you were reading it? Listening to
Oh, I was sitting and I shared the photo. A guy came with two, I think his children or something, or and he has a machine gun and rifle, and he took, I thought that's too good to be, somebody comes with a machine gun, M16. No, he took everything and shot, and he sat with the M16 and rifle. It was so intense, and so it's confusing to be in Tel Aviv at this time, and to witness that level of, it's like this guy reminded me with the stories I heard in the book. It's like, I think many Jewish people say, it's an ongoing thing. The Holocaust did not stop. That's what they feel. It's so difficult for them, so hard. I met a woman, I lost my way around Dizengoff Center. It was like 9:30. A woman with a dog, she was super kind. She said, I will walk you to the hotel. My GPS did not work. And she said, the hardest thing ever is to be a mom in Tel Aviv now, or in Israel. She said, my son is in the Lebanon border. I relate so much to her, then in my mind saying, how about being a mom in Gaza? Or in Nablus, where I come from? It's so confusing, that passion toward this lady, it's so much emotion. And you don't know how to get out of that. I don't know the answer, but I'm not expert, but I'm telling you my personal feeling and experience.
Danny, what chapter was hardest for you?
When you asked that question a couple weeks ago, as I was kind of rereading the book, I wrote down 3 chapters, but I don't want to take too much time. I found the chapter about Lida, of course, very, very, very difficult, impossible, but also the brutal honesty at the end of that chapter. I find Shavit's honesty courageous, but the chapter is brutal and difficult. The chapter about the beginning of the settlement project, I think, is so important and very, very just impossible. The true clash, the way he points out how the settlement project is totally upending the Ben-Gurion vision, the courage and the clarity of thinking of Ben-Gurion, who knew that, as he puts, that Zionism was skating on thin ethical ice, and the need to separate populations, the need to simply separate populations. But at the end of the day, the hardest chapter for me is the one on Masada. It lays so open the wound of I'll say this. I was raised in a traditional conservative movement synagogue, which means for me, I was raised and my grandfather was a conservative rabbi, and I was very, very active in the synagogue. I went to a Hebrew day school. I was raised in a Jewish movement that offered no theology. It was ethnic Judaism in a prayer setting, but there is no theology. And then at one point, when I was already a young rabbi, I read a line, oh, that was theology. Zionism was the God that did not fail. Zionism was the God that did not fail.
Wow.
So that comes through in this chapter on Masada. I'll just read. 1942 is far worse than anyone could have imagined. And this year, 2.7 million Jews are murdered by the Nazis. Within a period of 12 months, every 6th Jew in the world is exterminated. The Jewish people will never recover from the blow. Zionism will never overcome the loss. I think in order to understand 2024, you have to deeply understand that sentence, because that is so is what continues to drive us. What continues to drive us. And then when he writes, I'll just again say, The Holocaust is devastating for Zionism. Gone are the great Jewish masses that Zionism was designed to save. Gone is the great human reservoir that was to save Zionism. With no Eastern European demographic backbone, Zionism becomes a bridgehead that no reinforcements will ever cross, protect, or hold. Every Hebrew boy in the land of Israel now weighs as 10, as we have lost Jewish community 10 times as large as the Jewish community of Palestine. I think that myth, which I think was necessary to soak into the persona of the Jewish people in 1945 in order to survive, has become a kind of virus that's uncontrollable. It's almost a necessary virus for survival, but now it's become a kind of virus that's uncontrollable. And to think about that is simply hugely, hugely, hugely painful.
Let me use that as a bridge to another question I wanted to ask both of you, which is that the book, for those of you who haven't read it, he begins the book in 1897 with the arrival of 13 people, one of whom happened to be his great-grandfather, into the land of Palestine on an exploratory mission. My question to you is, it's always been my feeling about the Middle East, the way you tell the story and the way you think the equities align depends on when you start the story. I mean, you can start 3,000 years ago, you can start in any number of other places, and it changes who you think struck the first blow and who you think it basically has the moral high ground on things. If you were writing this book as opposed to reading it and starting this story, would you start when he started, or would you pick a different date to start with, and why?
My book would then be a longer book. I would, because I'm a rabbi, I would pick a different date. I would probably pick sometime. I'll pick 586 BCE.
Right.
The first Babylonian exile, which tells the story, when the fiction of Abraham takes root in the Jewish persona. So I would pick 586 BCE as the approximate date of the first Babylonian exile, but that's the date that the story of Abraham takes root in the Jewish psyche. Abraham going to the land of Israel.
When would you pick?
Well, it's a very complex question. In my judgment, I think because I believe, just bear with me why I'm saying what I'm saying, because Hamas does not represent all Palestinian people, and I personally believe they are a terrorist organization. And I deeply condemn what they said and what they did and what they do. That's the introduction of answering the question. Why did I say that? Because I do not believe that ideology should drive solving this issue or looking at it. I think most of the Palestinian people are secular people who really strive to really have a better life for their children. So I would choose 1948. And 1948 in our psychology is the Nakba. Then after that, there is something called 1967, which is the Naksa. And what I see when I travel across the Arab world is a version of this book, but written in the voice and the eyes and the mindset of a Palestinian that was living in his land, left to the diaspora, not a Jewish person was in the diaspora, came to his land. It's so bizarre. Literally, you could have that version of somebody called Ahmed in Damascus, Yarmouk refugee camp, or Kuwait, or somewhere else. Literally, of course, definitely we did not have a Holocaust, but the pain is the pain. The pain of the Holocaust is unbearable. You cannot compare it, as I said before. But in my judgment, 1948 is a critical, and I don't understand the Jewish settlers in the West Bank who are harassing farmers, confiscating land, uprooting trees. with all respect, I don't see difference in the mindset. Of course, again, I just want to be very clear. I am completely condemning what Hamas did. But it's like a camp of people who really do not want me and Rabbi Zemel to sit together and talk about compromise. So for me, I would write the book starting from 1948, because solving the problem of the diaspora Jews created a huge problem for us. A true problem that is going on daily basis. It's a true pain, not far from the pain that you all experiencing after October 7.
I'm going to ask you to stretch one notch further on the empathy envelope here. Let's bring this back to the United States. And this is the one time I will ask you to try to put yourself in the shoes of somebody you're not and who's not here. But let's kind of put ourselves, Danny, in your case, if you were reading this from the point of view of a young American progressive Jew on a college campus. And I'm going to ask you, Hisham, you can pick either of two, they would both fit you, but either a young Palestinian in Palestine reading this book, or a young progressive Palestinian American reading this book, okay? Mm-hmm. Danny, why don't you go first?
Well, first of all, I think all three of my kids read the book. Is that right, Louise? So, yeah, but they've been brainwashed by me. I would hope that a young person, a young American Jew who reads the book would develop a sympathy for the huge problem that he lays out at the end of the book that he sees we're living through right now, and realize that we're losing on every front. We are losing on every front. We are, and it's awful. We are on the losing team. Although militarily we're destroying Gaza, we are destroying our moral fiber at the same time. We're alienating this generation, and I would hope that they would try and do something to fortify the liberal Zionist world, which so needs a strengthening. In a sense, I would hope they would read this book as a cry of desperation, which I think, in a sense, it is. The book is a cry of desperation. I would hope that a young person, even in this year 2024, could hear that cry of desperation. Thanks.
Thank you so much for the question. It's like, the Gen Z generation and the new generation, the double standard when it comes to moral and principle matter to them really a lot, and they are questioning. They use the word whataboutism, and the concept of whataboutism is like when Biden came to power, in my judgment, he promised and he talked to people about value matters in Washington, because the tone and the words that come out of Washington really set the tone for the world. I'm not talking about what happened before, I'm just talking about what the message was when he came to the White House. And the war in Gaza and October 7 tested that whataboutism in the administration and in the psychology of young people. And it's not, I mean, I tell you, every Palestinian, like progressive, that come from the same school of thought I come from, can condemn deeply about what Hamas did. But Hamas does not represent us. It's a foreign group that we don't understand, like you do, really. I mean, but going there and having that number of kids and women killed at that scale is unbelievable. It's unbelievable by all means. And it does not make it right. It does not make it right. You go after the people that hurt you, and which I believe our enemy too, as secular Palestinian. So I think any average young person in Palestine or here saying, well, here we go. America is driven by interest, not by values. That is exactly what they say.
Are there any questions on cards?
Yeah, we should start to collect them. Beth? Okay, yeah. Let's give them to Beth. Beth, could you give them to Beth? Thank you so much. Who's gonna? Yeah. Beth's gonna try and see if they're common ones.
Great.
Beth's gonna do some editing to see if the same question's being asked a couple
Okay,
times.
while Beth does that, I'm going to, Danny, something I didn't tell you I was going to do, but I'm going to give you an opportunity if you want to address a question or a comment to Hisham, and then I'm going to do the same in reverse.
That's great. Where do you find hope for a future?
With Hannah. I mean, the new generation.
It's a big responsibility, Hannah.
I think the capability of young people to hold multiple thought, I never had that before. I grew up in an era where word is black and white, and that's dangerous. And I see young people are capable to say, listen, I think we love the state of Israel. Me too. I could say that. Okay, take my hat now as a Palestinian. What Jewish people did in the 21st century, like the end of the last century, is a miracle by all means. Is a miracle. I witnessed that when my dad had a cancer, and he had to stay in Hadassah and Karen. And his professor is Amos Shapira. I will never forget the name. He used to take me to a room and explain to me what my father is struggling with. The compassion I felt from that guy, it just blew my mind. I was like a teenager with a broken English, with a little bit Hebrew, coming from Nablus, trying to treat my father. I said unconsciously in that moment that this is a nation that deserves to be alive. Really, even with all the pain I come through. So that capability of our generation to hold two thoughts, that yes, the Jewish people are unbelievable awesome people with all what they went through. Look what they're doing. Israel is the startup nation. What they did in the last 20 years is a miracle by all means in terms of technology and knowledge. I can say that, but at the same moment I say, Alon Murray, cross of my town, is 100% wrong and immoral. And not having a state called Palestine close and to the state of Israel is absolutely not accepted. I can hold these two thoughts. That's why there is hope.
You want to direct the question to Danny?
Yes, I think that the biggest question for me is somebody like you, Rabbi Daniel, you have so much commitment and passion to the Jewish state and the Zionist movement, but you have the ability to step out of that and have the other thought I was talking about. How does your community see somebody like you? I mean, like your community.
Good luck with that one.
I don't know. I think some in the community really disagree with me in terms of my Zionism. I think they have from the day I came. I think there are those who don't see the place of Israel in Jewish life. I think there's some in the congregation that really prefer that I think some in the congregation understand my strong critique of Israel, but prefer I wouldn't say it aloud. And I tend to think that that there's a substantial number that appreciate the wrestling that I'm trying to do in terms of my commitment to classical American liberalism and Zionism. I'll say one more thing to you, Hisham, which I think is somewhat related. I don't want to talk too much. People are used to that from me sitting up here or standing up here. I think October 7th, the last 8 months, is, I was talking about this last night at dinner with our young rabbis. I think we're living in a moment in time that the last 8 months has kind of laid bare and put in really stark terms for us. And I think in different ways, at Micah, we're wrestling with them, with these things. I think we once assumed the narrative that the Jewish people were united. That was a big campaign slogan. I think we see now that we are not a united people in many ways. I think we grew up in many ways that Israel was a central focus of American Jewish life, and now Israel has become a central focus of American Jewish argument. I think we grew up with, I think we had an assumption that American progressive values and Judaism were interlocking hands in hand. And I think we see now that those who we think of as friends on the progressive left, have thought of as friends on the progressive left, have also been seduced by a kind of anti-Semitism, which is terrifying. And I think I thought perhaps very naively that anti-Semitism was kind of gone in this country. And I think we now see it on the right and we see it on the left, and we have a question mark. So I think 4 kind of very basic assumptions that we lived with beautifully for the last 50 or so years have now been really caught into question. And I think I hope, maybe this is more of a hope than a think, that Micah people kind of come here to puzzle through this kind of broken jigsaw puzzle together.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Beth, pick a few for us.
That's
Say it again, sorry. These? No, the others, yes. All right. I'm going to pick a couple. This is for you, Hisham. It says, when you say you lived every day in fear, can you help us people who have largely lived free lives understand what that means?
Thank you so much. I just can tell you a story that describes what does that fear mean. I was 17 and my brother had a trucking company. They call it cranes, you install. And a businessman from Herzliya, his name is Rafi, came to visit us on Thursday evening. And Rafi happened to be used to be in the Air Force, retired Army, then started a business to sell safes for the banks. So Rafi was sitting with us on the dinner table with the Palestinian food, kusa and zucchini, and he was so happy and so engaged. And suddenly, like young people threw stones at one of the Israeli jeeps. And in a friction of like 30 seconds, everybody actually gathered in the kitchen, including Rafi. And he's like, he didn't know what to say, what to do. And we gathered there and we stayed there for like almost 35 minutes until women started to talk to another woman outside. What happened? Oh, he's dead. The son of this family. As nothing happened. Everybody went home and we came back to you just look at his face. And Rafi experienced what does fear mean. He used to see us from the F-16 or whatever it is, like the airplane. And he experienced what does that fear mean. It's unpredictability. They could come anytime at 3 o'clock in the morning, and they can actually drag you for a prison without being actually being charged for anything. 3 of my cousins killed. One of them is Lubna, and she was like breastfeeding her kid in the first intifada. She got shot because she was in the wrong place at the wrong time. My other cousin was shot at a checkpoint. He did not do anything. He was just, there was misunderstanding in the communication. So that constant of what could happen tomorrow is the basic daily life. Even last week when I was in West Bank, I wanted to go see my mother. And there were 3 soldiers sitting on a checkpoint around Nablus. And you should see the line, like 4 miles. And the car is like worse than 210 in LA, where I lived, or 110, like the bumper to bumper, we call it. That's the fears, unpredictability. You don't know when they could come and take you, arrest you. It's unpredictable. That's what fears mean.
When you fly to Israel, do you land in Tel Aviv?
The first time in my entire life, because of Biden administration first time in my life I arrived there. It's like, what? That's too good to be true.
Crazy. Yes.
And I rented a yellow plate car, like a human being. And I drove in Tel Aviv. It's like unbelievable.
How did you feel when you got off the airplane? Did you feel safe?
It's like, welcome to Israel, to Daraba. It's like, oh my God. It's like very civilized country. It's like, I never seen Israel from that perspective. It's like Aliyah to me, like Palestinian Aliyah.
What airline did you fly back on?
I flew El Al.
Right.
El Al.
And what was your experience of that?
Oh, it's like, oh my God, they eat kosher. It's like, they ask for kosher, I ask for veggie. It's like, and you hear them talking, and it's like, oh my God, it's total normal. I felt home, basically, nothing different. But for me, I never did it in my life.
I have a couple of questions here that I guess you could say are political, but not contentiously political. One of them talks about the fact that both the Jewish and the Arab side seem to be, in some sense, captured by extremists. And do either of you see any promise? I mean, I'm, in a sense, asking you to play a different role than I've been asking you this afternoon. This is not just kind of an emotional reaction. This is actually a judgment on your part. But do you see any grounds for either optimism or action that would make the current reality less terrifying than it is?
You see, just as excuse me, I can just comment on this very quickly. You know, I spent 3 weeks in Palestine and then a week in Tel Aviv. I stayed in a hotel called Backstage, in the back of, they call it Dizengoff, Kikar Dizengoff, which is the heart of Tel Aviv. What blew my mind is that Israelis are trying to live a normal life in a not normal time, in non-normal region, in complete like a nonsense area with a lot of enemies around. It's like they just don't acknowledge that the occupation is not sustainable situation. It's not sustainable. It's not about right or wrong or okay, we have to create a situation in the West Bank where people voluntarily leaving. It does not work. It will not work because 5.3 million people are real people with families and feelings and emotion and connection to the land, and you cannot warehouse them. You cannot warehouse them forever. You got to find a way to live with them and to interact with them. So my point of view is that as much as we don't have a vision toward two-state solution, as much as we have more munition giving to the right wings and hardliners at both sides.
Anything you want to say about the extremism issue?
I will say this. I don't listen to podcasts. Someone told me to listen to the most recent Ezra Klein podcast of his interview with Oren Siegel. I read it. I didn't read it. I read Oren Siegel regularly. You should know he's a spokesperson for the right wing. You should simply know that he's a spokesperson for the right wing, and Ezra Klein decided to interview a spokesperson for the right wing, probably for his listenership, because about a month ago, he had an interview with Ari Shavit. So that's the one thing. I think the Netanyahu government is a repugnant, repulsive disaster, and I think for a number of reasons, the pressure is going to be brought, and there will be elections in Israel either by the end of this year or early in the next year, and that is the necessary first step towards sanity in Israel. That's a necessary first step, and if you know anybody who can do anything to put pressure on the Biden administration to put the pedal down even more, we need to have elections in Israel.
I think that, okay. Okay. There are Israelis and others who say that the immense expansion in settlements in the West Bank in the last decades has made a two-state solution impossible, and that a new solution is needed. Do you happen to share that view?
Well, I think one-state solution is the end of the Zionist movement vision, and it would be very hard for a Jewish person to accept one-state solution. I would love to have one-state solution where I could be living as a citizen under the rule of law, similar to what I experienced in California. But I don't think the Jewish state vision will be on the table. I think it is possible for two-state solution, even with all the difficult territorial continuity in the West Bank and Gaza. It will take a lot of courage by a leadership like Gantz or somebody else. Like Rabin tried and he lost his life. I think our connection to the land is as very passionate and strong as yours. And I don't think we're going to go anywhere. And I don't think that you're going to go anywhere. And I think until we get to I think there will be swap of lands between here and there, but it is impossible for the state of Israel and the Zionist movement to continue without having acknowledgement of having a territorial control for the Palestinians. It's impossible. I'm not just talking about that from Palestinian perspective. I'm talking about it as a rational, analytical person. It's impossible for them to keep expanding the settlement and having a matrix of control, sucking up the water, it's impossible. You are moving toward apartheid. It is actually moving toward apartheid. So that's completely contradicting the essence of the Jewish values and principle. So I think there are a lot of blind people. One thing I just want to mention, we do have a strong and big responsibility as the Palestinian people. The wave of suicide bombers in the heart of Tel Aviv strengthened those right wing in the current government. We do have responsibility to get rid of corruption. we do have responsibility to bring technocrat. So average person in Tel Aviv feel, oh my God, my neighbor is really serious about peace. But as much as we feel, oh, we can't control Gaza, it's impossible for anybody inside Israel to really push for a peace camp if they don't feel that there are Palestinian people who are serious about getting their internal home fixed and clean.
Danny, I have a last question for you and a last one for you, Hisham. The one for you is a phrase you use often, and I think in this case absolutely appropriately, which is it's complicated. But in this world, it's complicated isn't a solution, it's an observation. So what's the right way, as somebody who cares deeply about this and recognizes that complexity, to push forward on it? I mean, you were dealing with people who aren't apparently hobbled by a sense of complexity. They're pushing ahead forthrightly on fairly extreme positions. For those of us who recognize the complexity of it, what's the right way to behave?
I think we have to greatly strengthen the progressive Jewish institutions in this country and encourage them to really strengthen their voices in Israel. I think the total lack of knowledge of Israelis about the vast majority of American Jews is a huge, huge, huge problem. Having wandered a little bit outside of Temple Micah into Truah and now kind of a national rabbinical organization, truly a national interdenominational Orthodox Conservative Reform Rabbi, I can see on the national American Jewish organizational scene how the organizations of the left are not nearly as well funded and nearly as well organized as the organizations of the American Jewish right. We have the numbers, they have the dollars, and there's simply no question about that. And having the dollars, they control the media, okay? The American Jewish media is increasingly a heavily right-wing media. So we have an enormous amount of catching up to do. And then I think we have to communicate every single thing we can about this to Israel in every forceful way we can, both Jewishly and American politically. Otherwise, there's no choice. Otherwise, we're looking at the beginning of the end of the story.
Hisham, last question for
Yeah,
you is in the same spirit, but
yeah.
We're talking to a probably largely, maybe almost exclusively Jewish audience here. What would you like an audience like this to either know or do that you think would be supportive of a fair resolution of the complexities we're talking about?
Well, in my modest opinion, part of the solution for the Arab-Israeli conflict is in the hands of Jewish community and people like you, in my judgment, because my understanding is that Jewish community has been very good in writing checks for a long time, except recently after October 7, many of them started to understand the existential threat of the hardcore right-wing government that really hitting their head in the wall. Part of our role as Palestinian diaspora living here is to strengthen the connection and channels and communication with the progressive groups. Because as much as they understand that there are people like myself, I swear to God, I was not born in Monaco or Rivera. I was born in Nablus, so just I'm the average Joe, Palestinian-wise. So having connection and communication between Palestinian people like myself, I'm an ordinary person, and the progressive group, so they will have a strength and understanding of what's going on in the Palestinian community, vice versa. Us understand what's going on to support each other is critical, because I think it's time for the Jewish community to keep writing checks, but at the same time have some influence on the politics of Israel, because otherwise it's like you have a mad kid and you don't know what to do with that mad kid, you know. They're really mad. I mean, I cannot tell you how mad they are. And I don't blame many of Jewish people to be mad, but it's like you go to the dentist, they numb you. Do you feel anything? No. Do you feel anything? No. Guess what? When you go home and the numbing is ending, you will feel the pain. And they don't understand that. The Palestinian people are not going anywhere. And if you don't work with the Palestinian moderate like me, you're going to have another October 7 in Tulkarem or Jenin. It's a matter of time. It's a ticking bomb. So build bridges with people like myself and others so we can work together.
I hope others like me will see in that a message of hope. And I want to thank both Danny and Hisham for being as willing to share as they were.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much, Larry.